Cool. All right. Welcome everyone. So this is the sig-auth meeting for January 6th, 2021, the first one. I'm gonna do a little different order than we normally do because I'm gonna start with the main discussion topic because I want to make sure we sort of seed the idea in everyone's mind because I kind of want to be able to actually come to a conclusion by next sig-auth, which is basically what does the SIG want to do in 2021. So Tim had linked our open kept PRs and our open kept issues. We can walk through those if folks want to do that. But the general gist is, do folks have a desire / idea for what we would like to accomplish? I suspect PSP is on top of mind for a lot of folks and replacements thereof.
It sure is.
That was an easy one, so I figured I'd just mention it so that way no one thought we forgot about it. But yeah, does anyone have thoughts?
I feel like it would be useful, at least for me, to walk through the open issues in KEPs. Some of those are marked as stale, and I think kind of checking in on what the status is and some idea of what the plan is for closing those out would be useful.
Let's do it. All right, let's start with the PRs because there's not that many. This one doesn't belong to us.
Wait, could you zoom in your screen?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, this one's old. We'll start with the 2018 one. API server authentication to webhooks. Does anyone remember where we got to this?
I like this. I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
Was there a blocker, or was it like it's a good idea, but we don't know how to do it?
I believe that the person working on it changed to a different company and was not able to prioritize it or something.
I think this was originally filed as a blocker for dynamic audit webhooks, which have since been removed. I think the feature is useful outside of dynamic audit webhooks, but I think that's some of the history of why progress on this was, or development on this was abandoned.
Okay. I see Patrick is one person. That does sound right. Based on that. Let's see. So there should be an issue associated with this one, right? I'm
There
curious.
not be. I think it predated some kept stuff.
Okay. Okay. I guess what I'll ask is anyone on the call interested in taking ownership, since Patrick isn't, which is okay, happens. Or should we? I can take an action item to maybe send an email to the mailing list and see if anyone is interested.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might also be worth reaching out to API Machinery. See if anyone from that group would be interested in working on it.
Yes. Okay. Sure. All right. Cool. So that one's there. So I don't know if this one ever got traction. I think their desire was to use X509 search for service counts. Or maybe because they felt like tokens were too slow. Okay. But I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we ever discussed this specific proposal in the SIG meeting.
Yeah. Do you folks have any thoughts? I don't know. I feel like with bound service account tokens, I don't know. I don't want to add search to service accounts.
Isn't this something that could be handled with custom CSI plugins? Like at some point, if we're not actually trying to come up with extensible side channels for delivering this info instead of just shoving everything through a secret, like secrets aren't secret, right? A secret is a totally uniform security zone, which anyone who can see secrets can do anything that those secrets can do. Therefore, and like bound security tokens, the principle was service account tokens shouldn't be in secrets. Something like this, I think you could make a similar argument. It's like we should be doing something like creating a separate type of bound service account token via CSI local plugin or whatever. And we've got a couple projects in the SIG that do variations of this as well. And maybe that's the appropriate path.
You would still want to be able to have some way for whatever is creating the content in that volume to be able to sign the certificate in a useful way. And I don't think we have that.
Because we disallow it, you mean on CSRs, or you're talking about something separate?
I don't remember whether we disallow it or not.
That part of it, yeah. I mean, that maybe that's the question that we should definitely answer is what is the sig-auth perspective on what is the coordination points that we intend to expose for extensions within the platform for people who want to sign? Is that like a completely orthogonal thing they have to go do their own CRDs for? Should they use CSR or whatever? Is that fair? Is that what you're getting at, David?
Yeah, in part, I guess if we, in my mind, I would want it something like different than just general clients, but I guess the general client one we created would serve.
Are you talking about custom signer name?
Well, there's already a signer name for signing something for a Q client.
Right. So you could totally use that to make a service account cert.
You have to have something to approve it.
Yes.
Right. I mean, like, I guess that could be built. It's fairly powerful to have. But
If we're looking for what we're planning to work on next, I think the bound service account token, like actually getting that to GA and completed and getting the tokens and secrets, a mechanism to like turn those off for service accounts you don't need them in, is much higher priority. I feel like the building blocks for this sort of exist. I'm not sure we would want to expose this as a bit that anyone could flip and say, like, give me my service account credentials as a cert. Like maybe, but I'm not sure.
Certainly we would need more reason to do so after bound service account tokens and some of the, like, it should be possible to show this working without us having to make a code change today. And it wouldn't be as smooth as you want. And I kind of agree with, like, I would like to see bound service tokens, like, let's dramatically reduce the surface area risk of secrets on platform security before we introduce a new point of concern.
There's another aspect to this KEP, which is serving certificates. Bound service account tokens only solve the client authentication side of things.
Did that KEP discuss serving certificate? I agree that this
it did.
is much more interesting, but I didn't remember it talking about that.
It does.
Yeah.
What does that even mean for a service account?
Nobody knows.
Okay.
And honestly, like, so I had been like talking with a few people in the community on things like how would you do service account like identity across clusters, and like there've been a couple of caps, and like some of the secret stuff has also touched. Like this is something that's like been a topic in various people dealing with unification. Would it be appropriate, like with bound service tokens, we actually do have a clear way to associate you with an identity outside of the cluster. We would not have that with serving certs in the same mechanism, at least without more thought.
Can I suggest that we take this discussion offline in the interest of kind of getting through more here? I think the issue I linked, we have talked about this in the past and decided that it needed more evidence, and it looks like someone went and wrote up a CAP for this without kind of getting to that agreement. I'll take a look at the CAP in more detail and see if there's more evidence presented there.
Okay. So I have not been around for a bit. Has there been movement on this external TLS cert thing, aka I want to shim in my HSM assigned stuff? Yeah, no. No, I see nothing from my last comment in June. Oh no, sorry. Do folks have a sense for this? Do we want this? I don't know.
This seems like the server-side version of the client-side request signing bit, which I think ends up with us redefining a like an X509 TLS API, which I'm not eager to do, either client-side or server-side. I kind of like the idea of proxies. Like proxies are a thing, and the API is the HTTP API, proxy API. And if you want it client-side, you do it client-side, and if you want it server-side, you do it server-side. That's my take. What do other people think?
I'm curious because the folks that proposed this, you know, they did a presentation to us and stuff, and they seemed like they were looking at it for like some work they were contracted out to. So I presume they came up with something for their employment purposes, but they have not responded in any of the comments. So I'm just kind of curious if they, because I think we had recommended what is it, the new proxy field, proxy URL.
That was for the client side, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this one is purely client side. This CAP is all about the client. The request header proxy lets you basically do anything you want on the server side if you want to. So I think the server side is basically covered. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I didn't understand the requirements other than somebody asked me to do exactly this. And I tried to get clarification on first the issue, and they didn't reply, and they wrote a CAP, and then I pasted my comment on the CAP, and then they didn't reply to it. So I still have a lot for this specific implementation. I still have a lot of clarification around. I still need some clarification around the requirements. I feel like punting this to the whatever we're calling the new exec auth plugin mode seems reasonable.
Which plugin?
If we figure out how to do some sort of request signing using a plugin, seems like.
I thought we were saying we didn't want to do that, and we didn't want to.
I don't know. Did we say that? This was last SIG, 2 SIGs ago. I guess
I
last
said
SIG.
it.
I wasn't here.
I guess I was wanting to know what was needed that wasn't covered by a local authenticating proxy, and like were there things that we could do around the client Go and kube control talking to a local proxy, like making it a proxy on a Unix socket instead of an HTTP proxy, or like where there are
Okay.
things around that we could do to unblock that approach rather than trying to redefine like the full request signing service.
I think we violently agree with each other then, because
Okay.
that's also, I guess I was calling request signing, assuming it was out of kube control and out of core.
Okay.
And we had some like proxy mechanism to local socket. I would say, is somebody actually working on that?
So when a couple meetings ago, the folks who were talking about the request signing stuff, they had the action item to go try it against a proxy and like see if there were blockers or issues that prevented them from using that mechanism, and to sort of let us know if there were things that we could add to client Go that would improve that for them. But we haven't heard back.
Cool. I think we can back burner this one as well, pending that exploration.
Would it make sense to close this in favor of that if we don't anticipate adding call out to TLS signers? I would like to not have KEPs stay open for years.
Yeah, so I think I have the general sense that I agree with Jordan that we should not just leave this open. And if the desire is, please go try a proxy and report back to sig-auth at your leisure of what did not work well, which I suspect probably there'll be something. At the very bare minimum, the UX might be bad. And then we can make a new KEP for fixing whatever is not working. Do folks agree?
Yes.
Okay, Jordan, would you like the action item to close this in very nice terms?
Yeah.
If there's going to be a KEP imminently and somebody's actually actively exploring this and have some ways to make the external request signer thingy work, we could also wait a month to close it because it's been open for a really long time, and then point to this new thing. However, Jordan, you're really good at closing stuff, so I'll leave it to you.
It's really easy to reopen a thing. If there's a clear sort of path of exploration that is not implement an external TLS signer, I would direct towards that. And if that turns out to be impossible, we can resurrect this or open something more targeted based on the results of that exploration. I will take the action item to summarize that.
Does anything need to happen on the, so I had opened this issue a while back just to talk about request signing specifically and not just like TLS offload. Does this need anything? Are we just waiting for someone to go try this?
I think the outcome there is probably pretty similar. Like we didn't really want to define an API that pulled all the relevant bits of a request we thought would be important, and then discover like, turns out you also need the body. Turns out you also need like TLS information. Turns out you also need. And so I think the summary here is use the proxy mechanism. If that doesn't work, come back with the gaps and we'll work on specific proposals to address those gaps. So I would summarize the same thing here and close this the same way, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I'm thinking, I guess in the summary, I guess we should be open to things like extending kubectl to support proxies over like a Unix domain socket, just as an option. That way, if someone is interested in writing a KEP and doing the work for that, they're not discouraged from trying to improve that bit of the proxy flow.
That seems like a much more targeted and generally useful thing. I would be happy to see support for pointing a domain socket as a proxy.
Okay. That's good. Awesome. All right. I think so. We covered the PRs because there aren't that many, and this one's not ours. So if we go to issues, where the issues go? Oh no, we have a lot more issues. Do we need to talk about PSP at all? I feel like we've beaten this thing.
I think we can talk about it a little. Well, I guess this is kind of in the context of year-long planning. We know it's something we want to do. Tabitha and I were talking a little about timeline for this earlier. I think the deadline for enhancements for 121 is in about a month. And it seems somewhat unlikely that we're going to get to consensus on this in that time. But the goal, Tabitha proposed, and feel free to chime in, Tabitha, was that we aim to get a KEP merged or accepted for PSP before 121 goes out, so that then we can link the deprecation of PSP to the path forward, essentially, and then have a goal of kind of executing on that KEP in the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be cool to have an alpha for a replacement, but that would depend on a lot of things happening very quickly in a area where things have historically not happened very quickly. So I'm concerned that it would be cool, but not realistic to ship an alpha of a replacement in 121. But I think the most important thing is to ensure that we can have, as a project, a good message for PSP when we ship the deprecation notice, that folks who are currently depending on PSP will have a good public reason to believe that they're not being abandoned.
If I could understand, what are we saying that in the next month, someone will write a KEP and the SIG will review it and it will reach accepted state and merged within the next month?
I'm saying that that would be ideal, but is not realistic.
Tim was saying by the time 121 is released, we would like to have a KEP. So even the plan would be reviewed and accepted by the time 121 is released, and we would intend to start implementing that in 122.
Okay.
Basically what you said, Mo, but 4 months instead of 1 month.
I will say that the drumbeat of trying to meet a deadline is very helpful for spurring action. And so if we relaxed and we're like, oh, we've got 4 months to get this design put together.
Which is, which is why I led with the ideal would be to actually get a KEP in before the enhancement deadline for 121. And so like the current thinking is we will try to do that, but realistically acknowledging that there's a decent likelihood of failure there.
Even knowing that the conversations are going to take a little time, having the design out in the next 2 or 3 weeks so that those can start, even if they end up taking a month or two, like having the design ready to review within the next few weeks is the only way we're going to get something actually approved even by the time 121 ships. So
yeah, absolutely, and that has been the thrust of the conversation.
Great.
So
can't say anything more specific yet, because to do so would be making promises on behalf of people, but we're getting there.
Okay. So as a SIG security person, representative, what is your sense for like next sig-auth? Could there be a rough draft of a KEP open so folks could like look?
I'm gonna keep hedging on this, but that's what I want to have happen.
Okay.
But I cannot at this time promise it.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think that's good for PSP. I don't know what this is. It's from 2017.
Um, that's maybe more of a sig-node issue than a sig-auth issue. I think it's, did it make it to stable? Does it just need to be closed? I can take an action item to follow up on that.
All right, kubelet, yeah, let's get rotation. How far did we get?
Wait, is that still beta?
Apparently, that's what the tag says.
I think this,
Right, CSR event we won, but Jordan,
so
you,
one, I think the only remaining question was whether we wanted to try to get some sort of approval mechanism in place. So right now, the kubelet will rotate the certificates, but it will not, there's nothing in tree that will approve those certificates because we don't have knowledge of what DNS names the kubelet is allowed to have. The last question was whether or not that was required for GA. So we kind of ran out of time for 119 to think about that. So the API was completed, but nothing was done for the approval or moving this forward. If we don't add an in-tree approver, then I think this is probably unblocked for GA. But it feels sort of half-baked as a consumer of it. It's like, here's this thing, but I have to write my own controller to use it. Although in that way, it's not that different than like Ingress or something that's mostly an API and you bring an external controller to it. So maybe that's okay. I have had a lot of conversations with people who said, so I just turn this flag on and I get serving certificates. I'm like, well, if you write an approver, they say, well, what do I do to approve? I'm like, well, follow these steps. And then they say, I'm just going to approve all certificates that are pending. Is that cool? No, don't do that. Yeah.
This is very similar or the same problem as serving certificates for service accounts.
I think the names here for nodes are a little bit more constrained and clear.
yeah, especially if you use the node authorizer.
Well, on the serving side.
I guess the serving side, not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, but for service accounts, I see it
I
as
buy it.
very over-ended.
I will take an action item to summarize the outstanding questions for this one.
Jordan, what is your sense on like what would a built-in free approver do?
So it's possible that a mapping of node to allowed IPs and DNS names could be part of the cloud provider interface. So most cloud providers have a way to say, given a node, like what are the IPs and the host names associated with that node? And it could be reasonable for that thing to make the determination that a serving certificate for that node for a subset of those addresses is okay. So maybe this intersects with the cloud provider bits. I'm not sure.
Okay. That's fair. All right. So this is the exec plugins. Let's see. Andrew, I know you're working on the tests for this right now. I think that's really it, right? Get all the tests working, actually get proof that this is a functioning feature, promote the GA.
Yeah, I wrote down tests, metrics, existing usages, which you brought up, maybe some documentation, making the V1 struct, and
maybe I don't know if it's GA blocker, but a sample one would be nice.
yeah. And then bugs, I don't know if I just mentioned bugs 6 seconds ago, but those are the things that were in my head.
Anyone have anything to add?
The trickiest bug I know of is the one about spawning 1 million clients. And to create a client set, it spawns like 45 different clients from the config, and each of those has its own like background cert rotation loop garbage collection thing. Anyway, that I think that needs to be resolved. That's the most.
It's really bad for this because you might exec like 50 versions of your plugin at the same time. And if each one of those has a prompt, that's awesome. You just get.
Yeah. Things like that. That needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm looking at that issue right now. Also not looking forward to it at all, but I am looking at it.
Cool. Yeah, I think the worst case was that I think that someone had an exec plugin that actually caused the GUI prompt to show up. So then 50 of those showed up, and then their UI was just broken. All right, where are we at? Where are we at on token request? Is it still beta?
So this got decomposed into 3 distinct things so we could phase them in safely. So token request, the API itself and kubelet integration went GA in 120. The making the root certificate bundle available and went beta in 120.
Just
And
which
say again?
Which root CA, just so I know which root CA you're talking about.
This is the one that we will mount in to verify connections to the API server. So it's this CA bundle that's currently included in every service account token secret.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And so if that goes GA in 121, then we can take the projected tokens inserted by admission to beta in 121. So like it depends on, these things depend on the token request API, which is now GA. Projected token depends on the CA bundle, which could go GA in 121. And then projected tokens could go GA in 122. So.
Okay. Is anyone actively working on making those things happen?
Yes. Jihong did all the work in 119 and 120 on this, and he is continuing to drive that.
Okay, awesome. All right, so that makes me feel good. I'll assume this is continuing on. What is this? I don't remember what this is. Oh, this is the TLS upload for the service account tokens and such. Mike, are you doing work?
Yes. Yes, I very much want this to happen, and we'll dedicate time to make this happen.
Awesome. Because I know you guys already have this working, so we just need to see it.
Yeah, exactly. It's been working for quite a while.
That's good. I mean, it gives me confidence. Okay, I'll defer that to you. David, didn't we already do this?
It is beta, and I've been trying to think about how to write an E2E test for a configuration that can never happen. Because that's the requirement for GA. Yeah, our E2E tests don't set up nodes with invalid kubelet certificates, which makes it really hard to write an E2E test for. But to my knowledge, that's the only thing blocking it.
Okay. Could you use a kubelet, a running kubelet, to spin up a new kubelet with a screwed up cert?
Can you use an integration test?
There is an integration test already. We did that before we merged it.
Do we need an E2E test then?
Normally we require it for GA. I mean, I guess this group of people could decide that we could review the integration test and decide it was good enough for this feature and explain why. But normally we require an EDE test for GA.
I feel like for this case, I would accept an integration test.
Really? Isn't this like very specifically dependent on like the kubelet being messed up, right? So if you want to
Well,
actually,
that's when the condition happens in the field, but to actually test it, I'll point you to the integration test. You can see it.
Mhm. Yeah, my only hesitation would be that the bug that people might see in a real deployment isn't necessarily the bug that we test. But if you feel that it's the same code path, yeah.
I've used it for my own purposes, but yeah, I'll find the integration test. I'll link it. I'll explain why, and I guess I'll update the cap so you guys can take a look and decide.
Okay, so I will leave you with that action item, David.
I will.
Awesome, thank you. Tim, this is you.
Yes, I think that has a timeline on it.
It's stable. Is that what you said?
If you oh yeah, I'll follow up on this offline. There's kind of two different pieces to this. One is some changes that already went in for making the kubelet or making the node the controller on mirror pods. And I think there's a follow-up to make that required after enough time has passed. I can't remember where we stand on that. There's a separate issue around how we want to handle labels on mirror pods. The KEP had a proposal that got accepted, but then there were some problems with kind of bootstrapping around that that needed to be kind of rethought through. So yeah, that's where we stand on that.
Okay. I think if I remember correctly, this was beta now. The OIDC discovery for our service account tokens. See,
Yes.
Michael's on the call. Jordan, do you have a sense for where this is?
The beta criteria was met. I'm not aware of anything that would block it going to GA. So I think we should put it into the milestone and put it on our list to make sure Mike updates anything in the KEP that needed updating for GA.
So I put it in the 121 milestone.
Yep.
Question, are the labels on these issues, the stage label, is that the stage it's currently in or the stage that it's targeting in the milestone?
Nobody knows. I think that is the stage that it is targeting in the current release.
Okay, so this should say stable.
But should it say tracked yes still? Because that was from when the release team was tracking it in the last release. I don't know. I think this is a weird way to manage state.
Yeah,
I don't know how to use it.
Okay. Who is able to make sure Michael is working on this? Anyway? I think he's Google, right? I think he'll do that.
I can do it.
Awesome. Mike, I think you had some stuff about this, the HNC stuff, HNC control.
Yeah, we did the API review and code review. The notes are linked in the doc. Bunch of issues have been fixed, not all of them, and nothing really seems insurmountable, especially for an out of tree project. So I would say I'll go through and kind of summarize what the I would move towards just approving this and giving them their repo. They already have a repo. It's a giant mono repo. They want a specific one for agency. I don't see a problem with finishing this up. So this is for the multi-tenancy working group. Then we can close that out.
Okay. Does anyone else, so if I understood correctly, Mike, you reviewed this stuff. Does anyone else need to go review it? Or do you feel confident?
I did the code review, Jordan did the API review.
I feel confident.
That was gonna be my question. So because it was API reviewed, we're thinking this goes into Kates.io instead of, what is it, Xkates, just to save them future pain.
Jordan.
I don't know. I don't know if they want to, honestly.
I would try to. They get a choice, right? If you do the API review, they can decide what they want to do in the future. But just when they come in, if you can make sure they understand the trade-offs of that choice.
Hey guys, I'm Ryan working on HNC, so I can answer any. I don't know what our answer would be, but interested to understand the choice.
So there are two. Do we want to do it here, or do we want to do it separately? We can take it off.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm dead UK if you want to, or Jordan can explain it too.
Who's following up on this?
I mean, I can reach out to set up a time if you want. Let me know who I should invite.
You can just tag David and I. You could do it in Slack. Or start a email. Basically, you get to pick which API group, and there are implications, and be good to make that decision knowingly instead of just stumbling into one.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Users will thank you.
All right. Did we already talk about this? I feel like we already talked about this. We already talked about this. I have no idea what this is because I think it was, I was on leave. So this sounds cool.
I don't think that's sig-auth.
I mean, it's labeled as sig-auth.
Is this the one where they're going around and writing the extra tags into all the structs?
Yes.
Believe so.
That's going to be awful, but okay.
Can you remove sig-auth label? I don't know if it's sig instrumentation either. Working group security audit.
Maybe it was just the same person I associate with instrumentation.
Sounds good.
I'll just remove us and not remove.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think instrumentation has shown interest in that one in the past, but I can't promise anything for them, of course.
All right. Cool. All right. What is? Oh yeah, this was a cool thing. Oh, did it land in 120? Is it then? Okay. Start.
Yes, this is in progress.
Okay. Do we need to do anything to make it move further? So if it's
No, it'll keep chugging along. I don't think this is at risk of stagnation at this time.
Okay. So no follow-ups is what I'm hearing. Right.
This is primarily being driven by sig storage.
Okay. That's good. So let's see. Yeah, so we went over the stuff that's open. So we got about 10 minutes left. We could possibly do the demo if we want to, or if folks would prefer to just sort of talk about thoughts for the next year. We can defer the demo until next time. I'm open to either.
If someone was on the agenda to do a demo, I think it would be nice to let them do their demo so they didn't have to join 2 weeks in a
And
row.
we could shorten the time if you 5 minutes should be enough if you want to take some more time on other topics.
No, I'm totally fine with using the next 11 minutes. So, Jim, let me make you a co-host because I have absolutely no idea how any other way of letting you share your screen.
Okay.
For 2021 planning, I would say everyone just kind of think a little about what you would like to see out of the SIG beyond kind of the KEPs that we just went through over the next year. And then maybe we can grab some time to talk about that in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this is actually related to the the whole topic about pod security and PSPs. So one of the things we've been doing with Kyverno, and of course OPA Gatekeeper has been doing the same, is we support policies for pod security. And the question really is, what do we tell users as an interim solution? So if PSPs are being deprecated soon, until we have the replacements out, what are the guidelines and how do we kind of put something out which users can start using today for their pod security, right? So I guess for those who might not know, Kyverno is a policy engine. It just uses Kubernetes CRs for policies, so there's no external language or anything to programming, and it's pretty straightforward to use within clusters. So I won't go through too much details on Kyverno, but what I want to talk about mostly is the pod security policies. And what we did is we followed the security standards which were put out. So the policies are organized based on those standards. So the default and restricted. And there's a set of policies, of course, for each one of these, right? So what I can quickly show is what the user experience looks like if you're starting pretty much, without Kyverno. You want to install Kyverno and run these, and then we can try running a workload and see what that looks like. So to install Kyverno, I'll just go through, command line installation. I will skip past this Helm part of it. Yeah, so currently, let me just make sure I'm not running Kyverno here. Yep, so that's good. I'll just go ahead and install from the YAMLs. And at this point, I should have the Kyverno namespace. I'll have some pods running in there, but no policies, right? So the next step would be, I want to install the pod security policies to at least get the recommended level of security. So going back over here, and again, there's 2 levels. I'm going to pick the restricted level. And this will just, in terms of the policies, it should bring in, these are the levels in addition to everything in the default level. So running that back on my cluster, it would look something like this. So it's going to install a few policies. Once customized does this thing. And so if I now do, so cpol is the short form for cluster policy. I see I have a bunch of policies. They're all sent to enforce mode. So Kyverno has 2 modes, audit or enforce. And enforce will block requests, right? So now if I try to run a workload, I just have a very simple Nginx workload here. So I'm going to try and run that in the cluster. We'll just do create -f. I think this was Nginx pod, or actually let's run it with the deployment and the service. So in this case, the one policy it violates is running as non-root. So that's what got flagged from the restricted mode and it blocked the request, right? So, and the interesting thing is the policy will work on all of the pod controllers. So in this case, it was a deployment. And I can, just for reference, I'll show what the policy looks like. If we go back into Kyverno, in the docs, we have this policy documented. So the way this reads is it's a bit of a decoration on the YAML where it's just that if security context and if run as a non-root, then it needs to be set to true, right? And there's variations to catch all of the different cases. So I think that, just wanted to demonstrate this and show what's available. The other question we had, and I think there was an open PR on this, is, do we, I guess, just thoughts and, should something like this be referenced from the pod security standards, as well as, of course, if OPA Gatekeeper has similar implementations? And the other question I had is, if there's any way we can get some help in auditing and going through these policies, as we're recommending them to users to use one of these type of implementations, what would it take to get some review on this or some help in making sure this is the right set of security standards we want to, I guess, document and provide? So maybe on the pod security standards itself, I mean, right now we have a link to the PSPs, but what would be, Tim, I think we had some discussions on this and there were some comments on the PR, right? The folks managing the documentation, right? Where they thought perhaps it wasn't the appropriate thing to do to link to a project like this. So I don't know what the alternatives are for that.
Yeah, I haven't followed up on the PR to see if there's more updates there, but I think there was some disagreement between us about whether we should be linking things like this. Personally, I would like to see these projects being linked from that standards document, because the document on its own isn't that useful to most users, and I think the implementations of it are a lot more useful. I would also like to see a gatekeeper implementation linked there as well.
Right.
Wasn't the original concern that we further turn ourselves into kingmakers, right? So we would link in, we would link in Kyverno, we would link in Gatekeeper, we link in security context constraints, and those all happen to be our employers, and thus.
I feel like that's less of a concern if the links are going out to projects which are CNCF projects. I feel like if we included like a link to a closed source Kubernetes admission controller, that would certainly cause a bad look. But as long as it's within like CNCF family, I feel like the concern is not quite as strong. Like it wouldn't have to say, sig-auth recommends using blah, but it could say, the community has implemented several ways to be able to apply these policies in practical use to your cluster. For example, here are some projects. I don't know how much that would cause us to be looking like we have the kingmaker role, but it's a thought for discussion.
Yeah, I think this came up with the docs folks once before. You remember the PR that tried to remove every reference to the Google Cloud Provider stuff? So they've gone through before, and even though the projects were open source, they didn't want to directly link. And again, it was a utility thing, like how useful is this if you can't find an instance of your cloud provider? I don't remember whether they created some reusable policy for how to handle the situation.
They did. I can try to find it and link to it. apart from just the mechanics of like whether it conflicts with guidance around the website, it would be helpful to have like a rationale for what's included in the list. And Jim, I think something you said in terms of review or eyes on a particular implementation. I think we had talked at one point about having a test that would basically say, does this control actually limit the things that are defined in each pod security standard? Like, does it keep you from creating a pod with run as root? Does it create you from creating a privileged pod? Kind of enumerating these things. So if we had that, that would be a pretty, there wouldn't be a lot of like judgment, like individual judgment, kind of judgment call stuff. It would be like, does it pass the test suite? If so, and maybe is it an open source project, or like, does it meet some criteria for being included in the website? That would be a much easier decision. Like, does it pass the suite and is it open source? Link it.
That would be a lot closer to what we had for the client levels. Do you remember the client levels when people were trying to write clients in Java and Python and all? Daniel and I came up with a list of like, you need to be able to support reading a kube config, you need to be able to support these operations. I could see that.
So would that be best done as a separate like benchmark or test tool, or what would be? So I think in one of the previous meetings I demonstrated what we did for multi-tenancy benchmarks. So we're still very open and willing to morph that tool into a general set of benchmarks, which also covers pod security. But just want to make sure.
We had talked about integrating this into the multi-tenancy benchmarks in the past, I think. I almost feel like a starting point could just be to, I'm not sure exactly where this would go, maybe just on the website and link it through there, but a directory of a bunch of pod manifests that can be dry run and say, these pods should be created, these pods should be rejected in a namespace enforcing this policy. And then the test tool binary can just be kubectl apply dry run.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That should be okay because it's mostly around just pod configurations.
Well, it depends. Some restrictions on what kind of pods can get created are also based on who creates that pod. So we use this in OpenShift with our SCCs, where whether a pod gets accepted or not is also dependent on the power of the user requesting that pod. And we make use of that feature to be able to run things that have very constrained pod profiles from controllers. So the controller itself gets elevated to create just what it can inside of a namespace where the service accounts don't have those privileges.
So the standards doc here is agnostic to how these policies are bound to, how they're applied essentially.
But a tool that tries to run with, say, kubeconfig is going to be, if you try to run that as a cluster admin in OpenShift, say, you'll get one answer. If you try to run it as a standard project administrator, you get a different answer.
Same thing with PSP.
But the goal of the tool wouldn't be to, this wouldn't be a conformance test. This would say, if you want to test that, some user or some namespace is conforming to this policy, then you could run it, against that namespace, or, get the admin to impersonate the user they want to test. Or if you're, in the case of something like the Kafir demo we just saw, you can say, well, okay, set it up with the policies applied to one namespace, or I'm not sure exactly how the binding works there. And then, verify it. Maybe you could even integrate it as a integration test in Kaverno.
So maybe as a next step, I'd be happy to, see if we can map each one of everything listed here in the pod security standards to a set of YAMLs, because if that works, that would be the easiest. And then we can, yeah, if there's more mappings or control required, either based on user or namespace, I think then that will be left up to different policy engines or different implementations, right? Because they would do it differently.
I mean, could you just cheat and like in this pod YAML that we were discussing, just have a service account YAML and give it ability to create pod, and that's it?
Well, I'm pointing it out as like just a thing to consider when you write that doc. I think the idea of having a tool to test this is a good one.
Okay. All right. So maybe, yeah, I can follow up, Tim, with you and any others who are interested offline, and we can discuss what that would look like.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
All right.
We are over time, guys. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.